Hi, my name's Lonnie Ellis. I'm the Associate Director of the Catholic Climate Covenant, and see that's up now. I was feeling kind of fancy, so I went ahead and put a PowerPoint together for you all. And so with the Catholic Climate Covenant, we are heavily focused on the Clean Power Plan, so that's really what I'm going to focus on as part of your asks to members of Congress. I'm also a lay Franciscan. And I think the Jesuit tradition and the Franciscan tradition are just some of the richest things that we have in this church, it's really great to be with you all here. So the first thing, when we think about climate change, I think is just really important, is to kind of prayerfully call to mind why you care about this issue, right? And it's not because of parts per million, right? But it's because of people, our sisters and brothers around the world. And this is what we need to communicate. I think there's so much, an issue that it gets talked about as the environment out there, right? And especially the people who already don't care much about the environment, that's not going to get them to care about climate change, right? So we have to make this, I think, a lot more about people and about the common good for all of us. So here's a picture of Bangladesh. And, I spent some time in India. I know that people are living out very precarious lives, and we are making this much worse. So in our lifetimes, we're going to see, and as we continue to see, a lot of really scary things happening to people, right? The World Health Organization estimates that 150,000 people die every year right now because of climate change. And we are just getting started, and that's because of natural disasters and increased famine and diseases. And Bangladesh, in possibly just a few decades, a third of the country could go underwater, and you would have 20 million people streaming into India or other places. And India has already built an electrified fence to keep people out. Like, this is an area that has seen all kinds of bloodshed, and this civil unrest that's going to be created from this. We could stop that. We could go back in time and say, actually, like in some cheap movie where it's like, oh, go back in time and stop this assassination from happening. We could go back and stop, all this suffering that's going to be taking place. So we got to think about people, and who is it for you? Maybe it's people impacted by Superstorm Sandy, bringing it a little bit closer to home. Or maybe it's wildfires out west. I think getting in touch with why we care about this is just hugely important to be able to communicate that to our representatives. And what we do now has huge impacts for the whole climate system to come, and we basically have 5 years. We have 5 years to change the politics on climate change and save millions of lives. That's our mission. And I think there's a lot of hope, and we can talk about that. But I think we need to be clear that we are operating on a closing window, a rapidly closing window, right? So talking about the Clean Power Plan. Okay, 3 things I want to say. First, the Clean Power Plan is a really big deal. And it is under heavy attack. And we need a response that's both faithful and strategic. So first, it's a really big deal. The first ever limits on carbon pollution drive CO2 down 30% from 2005 levels by 2030, give states great flexibility. There's all kinds of tools that we can use. We can do energy efficiency. We can do more renewable energy. Some states already have cap and trade or some kind of carbon tax program. Those can all work in this system. And so the Keystone Pipeline is a really kind of important symbol, I think. The Clean Power Plan actually would reduce carbon emissions 10 or 20 times of what's going to be coming through the pipeline. This is the plan proposed by the EPA in June to do the first ever limits on carbon pollution from power plants, at the source right there. And it's part of the president's climate agenda, but the thing that Congress can do is block it. And even before the EPA came out with this plan, the House voted to block the EPA from being able to do this. The Senate didn't take up the vote, but it probably will. So the other thing that we have to know is that we're a bit of an anomaly around the world. I mean, many countries have already taken pretty aggressive action on climate change. Here's 20 different countries surveyed on what they think about climate change. We were last in terms of making the connection to human activity. We're a bit of an anomaly, and so I think we should be heartened to know that we can turn this thing around. Other countries are way out ahead of us. And we have a lot of work to do in our own country. And that's why I think the focus for my organization is here on the Clean Power Plan and not on an international treaty, for instance. Because how is an international treaty going to happen if the U.S., historically the largest emitter, isn't a part of it? And how are we going to be a part of it in any meaningful way if we're not willing to do a relatively modest step of doing the Clean Power Plan? So here in D.C., you get to say things like, I was talking to Gina McCarthy the other day, and so she's the EPA administrator, right? And so she was at the gathering of the UN leaders in New York recently, and she said, I was there to talk about all kinds of different things internationally, and all everyone wanted to ask me about is, what with the Clean Power Plan? You all are going to do that for real? Or is Congress going to let you do that? It is such a big deal for us internationally that I don't think these two guys would be drinking wine if this had not been proposed. The Clean Power Plan sets the stage for international agreements because we are doing almost nothing on climate change compared to other countries, and we can't even talk about what we're going to be doing unless we take a step like the Clean Power Plan. And it is under heavy attack. So Senator Mitch McConnell will likely become the new majority leader, and he said it is his top priority in the new Senate to block the EPA from being able to do this. And why? It's not because of jobs. You're going to hear that. This is going to kill millions of jobs. In the 1920s, there were 750,000 coal mining jobs in the country. Okay, there were a lot of coal mining jobs in the 1920s, 750,000. Today, there are 88,000. 750,000 to 88,000. There are more people working in the solar industry right now than there are coal mining, even though solar is like 2% of our electricity and coal is 40%. There's so many more workers that we can employ with solar industry, putting on solar panels all on residences across the country. We could have a great jobs boost if we made this transition. It's really, I think, ideology. That's really holding us back. And I think industry knows that this is just the beginning. This is actually relatively modest. The Clean Power Plan, it's a big chunk. It goes right at the main sources of carbon pollution that we have in this country, but it's actually relatively modest in terms of how much states have to change. Virginia's assessment, there's an analysis done that they're already 90% towards their Clean Power Plan goal. Ohio, somewhat similarly, already moving towards their goal on things that they were already planning to do. So these plans take place. So this is more about, will we act on climate change? This is not about what is the carbon pollution is going to be taken on, what's going to happen to the economy, what's going to happen to jobs. The Clean Power Plan is about, is the country going to get serious about climate change or not? That's why this is a fight. It's not because of any huge structural changes that would need to take place because of this plan. So we need a response that is faithful and strategic. Archbishop Wensky and Bishop Pates are heads of relevant committees for the U.S. Bishops' Conference, and so they're leading bishops who sent this letter endorsing carbon pollution limits. For the first time ever, they said, let's go ahead. We need to put some limits on carbon pollution in our country. And they say because of prudence, okay, we know we don't need to know everything to know we must act. Like, absolutely, don't tell me, oh, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. Okay, go study what the scientists are actually saying. We don't need to know everything to know we must act. And it's about the common good. And I think a really powerful messaging for a lot of the leaders that you're talking to is about public health, especially for the poor and people of color. And that's exactly what the Bishops' Conference addressed as well. With this preferential commitment to the poor, they emphasized in their letter, where are these power plants usually placed? In low-income communities, and even more often, it's in communities of color. It's based more on that than on income. So what we're asking legislators to do then is just to do no harm, because this will go through unless Congress blocks it. And they seem pretty intent on blocking it right now. And so some leaders, I think, this is a moral obligation. I don't know why I crunched that R off of there. That's crazy. But this is the crisis of our time, and we're really racing towards irreversible climate disaster. And to save millions of lives, we need to unite fast. And so I think when you go in and talk to these legislators, think about the staffer that you're meeting with. I was talking with Bill from Rockhurst in Missouri, and and he said, we're talking to Senator Blunt, and he doesn't really want to do anything on this. What should we even say to him? And I think about the staff member that you're about to talk to, and say, we need you on this mission with us. Like, we need to save millions of lives, and we need you on this mission. You're in a very important place to be in the senator's office, in that particular very conservative senator's office. Like, what can you do? And so I think too often we don't treat them like a human, these staffers like a human, but instead we say, you need to tell the senator this. But think about that staffer that you're meeting with, and think, what is it that they could do in this big mission that we have to save millions of lives? What is it that they could do? Thank you all for being here. Like, you are a shining light for us.